Hi, it's Lolli here back at Book Club where we're reading Are You There, God? It's me, Margaret. We're going to begin with Chapter 10 today. Three things happened the first week in November. Laura Danker wore a sweater to school for the first time. Mr. Bennett's eyes almost popped out of his head. Actually, I didn't notice Mr. Bennett's eyes, but Nancy told me. Freddie the lobster noticed too. He asked me, "How come you don't look like that in a sweater, Margaret?" Then he laughed hard and slapped his leg. Very funny, I thought. I wore sweaters every day since I had so many of them, all made expressly for me by Grandma. Even if I didn't, even if I'd stuffed my bra with socks, I still wouldn't look like Laura Danker. I wondered if it was true that she went behind the A&P with Evan and Moose. Why would she do a stupid thing like that? What reminded me of Moose was that he cut our grass and cleaned up our leaves and said he'd like to be back in the spring. So unless I bumped into him at Nancy's house, I wouldn't see him all winter. Not that he even knew I existed. I had to hide from him ever since that we must incident. But I watched him secretly from my bedroom window. The second thing happened was that I went to church with Janie Loomis. Janie and I had gotten pretty friendly. We were especially friendly in gym because Ruth, the girl who was second in line, was absent a lot. So Janie and I got to talk, and once I came right out and asked her if she went to church, she said, "When I have to," she said. So I asked her if I could go with her sometime just to see what it was like, and she said, "Sure, how about Sunday?" So I went. The funniest thing was it was just like temple because it was all in English, but we read from a prayer book that didn't make sense, and the minister gave a sermon I couldn't follow, and I counted 8 black hats, 4 red ones, 6 blue, and 2 fur. At the end of the service, everyone sang a hymn. Then we stood on line, which it should be in line, to shake hands with the minister. But I was a pro at it. Janie introduced me. "This is my friend Margaret Simon. She's no religion." I almost fainted. What did Jamie have to go and say that for? The minister looked at me like I was a freak. Then he smiled with, "Aha, maybe I'll win her look." "Welcome to the First Presbyterian Church, Margaret. I hope you come back." "Thank you," I said. "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I've been to church. I didn't feel anything special in there, God, even though I wanted to. I'm sure it has nothing to do with you. Next time I'll try harder." During this time, I talked to Nancy every night. My father wanted to know why we had to phone each other so often when we were together in school all day. What could you possibly have to discuss after only 3 hours? He asked. I didn't even try to explain. Lots of times we did our math homework over the phone. When we were done, Nancy called Gretchen to check answers, and I called Janie. The third thing that happened was that week was the principal of our school announced over the loudspeaker that the PTA was giving a Thanksgiving square dance for three sixth grade classes. Mr. Bennett asked us if we knew how to square dance. Most of us didn't. Nancy told the 4 PTSs the square dance was going to be really super, and she knew all about it because her mother was on the committee. She said we could all write down who we wanted to dance with, and she'd see what she could do about it. It turned out that we all wanted Philip Leroy, so Nancy said, "Forget it. I'm no magician." For the next 2 weeks, our gym period was devoted to square dancing lessons. Mr. Bennett said if we're going to be given the party, the least we could do was to show our appreciation, was to learn to do the basic steps. We practiced with records, and Mr. Bennett jumped around a lot, clapping his hands. When we had to demonstrate a step, he used Laura Danker as his partner. He said it was because she was tall enough to reach his shoulder properly, but Nancy gave me a knowing look. Anyway, none of the boys in our class wanted to be Laura's partner because they were all a lot smaller than her. Even Philip Leroy only came up to her chin, and he was the tallest. The problem with square dancing lessons was that most of the boys were a lot more interested in stepping on our feet than they were in learning how to dance. And a few of them were so good at it they could step on us in time to the music. Mostly I concentrated on not getting my feet squashed. On the morning of the square dance, I dressed in my skirt and blouse. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I can't wait until 2 o'clock, God. That's when our dance starts. Do you think I'll get Philip Leroy for a partner? It's not so much that I like him as a person, God, but as a boy, he's very handsome, and I'd love to dance with him. Just once or twice. Thank you, God. The PTA decorated the gym. It was supposed to look like a barn, I think. There were 2 piles of hay and 3 scarecrows, and a big sign on the wall in yellow letters saying, "Welcome to the 6th grade square dance," as if we didn't know. I was glad my mother wasn't a chaperone. It's bad enough trying to act natural at a dance, but when your mother's there, it's impossible. I know because Mrs. Wheeler was a chaperone and Nancy was a wreck. The chaperones were dressed funny, like farmers or something. Nancy's mother wore dungarees, a plaid shirt, and a big straw hat. I didn't blame Nancy for pretending not to know her. We had a genuine square dance scholar. He was dressed up a lot like Mrs. Wheeler. He stood on the stage and told us what steps to do. He also worked the record player. This is how you all know it's in the 70s. He stamped his feet and jumped around, and now and then I saw him mop his face off with a red handkerchief. Mr. Bennett kept calling us to get into the spirit of the party. Relax and enjoy yourselves, he said. The 3 6th grades were supposed to mingle, but the 4 PTSs stuck close together. We had to line up every time there was a new dance. The girls lined up on one side and the boys on the other. This is how you got a partner. The only trouble was that there were 4 more girls than boys, so whoever wound up last on the line had to dance with another leftover girl. What only happened to me and Janie once, thank goodness. What we did was to try to figure out who was our partner was going to be in advance. Like I knew I was 4th in line that Norman Fishbein was going to be my partner because he was 4th in line on the boys' side. So I switched around first because Norman Fishbein is the biggest drip, which means they didn't like him in my class. Well, at least one of the biggest drips. Also, Freddie Barnett was to be avoided because all he could do was tease me about how come I didn't look like Laura Danker in a sweater. But I noticed that once he danced with her, his face was so red he looked more like a lobster than he did when he was sunburned. The girls shuffled around more than the boys because most of us wanted to get Philip Leroy for a partner, and finally I got him. This is how it happened. After everyone had a partner, we had to make a square. My partner was Jay Hassler, who was very polite and didn't try to step on my feet once. Then the caller told us to switch partners with whoever was on our right side. Well, Philip Leroy was with Nancy on my right side, and Nancy was so mad she almost cried right in front of everyone. Even though I was thrilled to have Philip Leroy all to myself for a whole record, He was one of the footsteppers, and dancing with him made my hands sweat so bad I had to wipe them off with my new skirt. All at 4 o'clock, the chaperone served us punch and cookies, and at 4:45, the dance was over, and my mother picked me up in our new car. My father gave in around Halloween when my mother explained that she couldn't even get a quart of milk because she had no car, and that Margaret couldn't possibly walk to and from school in bad weather, and that the bad weather would be coming very soon. My mother didn't like my father's suggestion that if we got up early and drove him to the station, she could use his car all day long. Our new car is a Chevy. It's green. My mother was in a hurry to drive home from the square dance because she was in the middle of a new painting. It was a picture of a lot of different fruits in honor of Thanksgiving. My mother gives away a whole bunch of pictures every Christmas. My father thinks they wind up in other people's attics. That's the end of chapter 10. Let's go on to chapter 11. By the first week in December, we no longer had our secret names at PTS meetings. It was just too confusing, Nancy said. Also, we were just about to give up on our boy books. For one thing, the names never changed. Nancy managed to shift hers around. It was easy for her with 18 boys, but Janie and Gretchen and I always listed Philip Leroy number 1. There was no suspense about the whole thing, and I wondered, did they list Philip Leroy because they really liked him, or were they doing what I did, making him number 1 because he was so good looking? Maybe they were ashamed to write who they really liked, too. The day that Gretchen finally got up the guts to sneak out of her father's anatomy book, we met at my house in my bedroom with the door closed and a chair shoved in front of it. We sat on the floor in a circle with the book opened to the male body. Do you suppose that's what Philip Leroy looks like without his clothes on? Janie asked. Naturally, dope, Nancy said. He's a male, isn't he? Look at all those veins and stuff, Janie said. Well, we all have them, Gretchen said. I think they're ugly, Janie said. You better never be a doctor or a nurse, Gretchen told her. They have to look at all this stuff all the time. Turn the page, Gretchen, Nancy said. The next page was the male reproductive system. None of us said anything. We just looked until Nancy told us, my brother looks like that. How do you know? I asked. He walks around naked, Nancy said. My father used to walk around naked, Gretchen said, but lately he stopped doing it. My aunt went to a nudist colony last summer, Janie said. No kidding, Nancy looked up. She stayed a month, Janie told us. Now, a nudist colony is where they don't wear clothes. She stayed a month, Janie told us. My mother didn't talk to her for 3 weeks after that. She thought it was a disgrace. My aunt's divorce. Because of the nudist colony? I asked. No. Jenny said she was divorced because she went. What do you suppose they do there? Gretchen asked. Oh, they just walk around naked is all. My aunt says it's very peaceful, but I'll never walk around naked in front of anybody. What about when you get married? Gretchen asked. Even then, Janie insisted. You're a prude, Nancy said. I am not. It has nothing to do with being a prude. When you grow up, you'll change your mind, Nancy told her. You'll want everybody to see you, like those girls in Playboy. What girls in Playboy? Janie asked. Didn't you ever see a copy of Playboy? Where would I see it? Janie asked. My father gets it, I asked. Do you have it around? Nancy asked. Sure. Well, get it, Nancy told me. Now? I asked. Of course. Well, I don't know, I said. Listen, Margaret, Gretchen went to all the trouble of sneaking out her father's medical book. The least she could do is show us a Playboy. So I opened my bedroom door, went downstairs trying to remember where I'd seen the latest issue. I didn't want to ask my mother. Not that it was so wrong to show it to my friends. I mean, it's so wrong my father shouldn't get it at all, right? Although lately I think he's been hiding it because it's never in the magazine rack where it used to be. Finally, I found it in his night table drawer, and I thought my mother caught me and asked me what I was doing. I said we were making booklets and needed some old magazines to cut up, but she didn't catch me. Nancy opened it right to the naked girl in the middle. On the page where there was a story about her, it was Hillary Bright, 18 years old. 18? That's only 6 more years, Nancy squealed. But look at the size of her. They're huge, Janie said. Do you suppose we'll look like that when we're 18? Gretchen asked. If you ask me, I think there's something wrong with her, I said. She looks out of proportion. Do you suppose that's what Laura Danker looks like? Janie asked. No, not yet, Janie said. But she might at 18. Our meeting ended with 50 rounds of we must increase our best. That's the end of chapter 11. Tune in next time for chapter 12 and 13. Have a good day.